Welcome back, everybody. We are so thrilled that you have joined us on Just the News, and we're giving you none of the noise. That's why we want to bring in Representative Elise Stefanik, House Republican Conference Chairwoman. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
This weekend, I think a lot of people on social media saw the imagery of thousands and thousands of cops on the streets of New York for Detective Jason Rivera's funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Me as a layperson, it brought tears to my eyes. I saw a lot of respect on the internet paid to this man, but we are also existing in an era where cops are vilified. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I agree with you that I hope all America was tuning in to that funeral, and it was incredibly inspiring to see the tens of thousands, over 100,000 men and women in blue, our heroes in blue, lining the streets in New York City. This is a young life, a young public servant, a young hero who at the age of 22 lost his life in the line of duty. And we have to stand up as elected officials to push back on this shameful, hateful, defund the police movement. We stand with Officer Rivera. I also want to point out the remarks by his wife were just absolutely powerful. And it is a disgrace that there are elected officials, including the Manhattan DA, who essentially are supporting this war on cops. We see the consequences of these policies with skyrocketing crime, with skyrocketing homicides. We need to be supporting our men and women in blue.
Do you perceive a shift taking place now that you have a former cop in the office as mayor of New York City?
I do perceive a shift. You know, Mayor Adams has been very strong in terms of his support for the police. He has served in the NYPD, and I think that's a seismic shift that we saw in the electorate, because people are seeing the consequences of this defund the police movement, of the failed bail reform in New York State and in New York City, where crime has skyrocketed. So I do think this is a shift. This should not be a partisan issue. I don't think it's a partisan issue among the voters. Voters in my district, both Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, they support our police. They support law enforcement officers. It's just far-left elected politicians who are so out of touch with the consequences of these horrific policies.
Yeah, that is such an important point. Politicians just disconnected from what real Americans want. The other day, you sent a letter to President Biden on another issue that I think Americans stand with you on, and that is the mass trafficking of illegal criminal migrants into American communities around the country, taking them from the border, bringing them to places like Westchester County in New York and other places. How concerned are you that this is going on with almost no accountability, no visibility for Congress?
I am extremely concerned, which is why I led an effort to the administration requiring full transparency, but also telling them to absolutely stop this illegal transportation of illegal immigrants flooding in the southern border to different parts of the country. We know this because of freedom of information requests. Otherwise, the American people would not have known this. And this is in, as I said, New York State, in White Plains. It is absolutely outrageous. Credit to our individuals who did this request. But my fear is this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have a crisis on the southern border, but it's not just limited to the southern border. We see the impact in New York State. Look no further than that video itself showing illegal immigrants flooding into our state.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it affects people far, far away from the border. I want to follow up on that quickly. The Republicans have a good showing in polling right now. It looks like it could be a good trend year for Republicans. They get in control of Congress in early 2023. What are the top priorities that Republicans in the House want to get done right away?
Well, first of all, we're going to earn this majority. We're going to work hard between now until Election Day to put forth what our priorities are, but also prosecute the case of these failed policies from unified Democrat far-left government. What are our priorities? Number one, we're going to secure the border. That's incredibly important. Number two, we're going to stop the spending that has led to historic inflation, the highest rate of inflation over the course of my lifetime. We're going to be tough on China, which Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi failed to do. We're going to invest in a strong military when we see Joe Biden and House Democrats showing weakness on the stage. And we're going to support our law enforcement officers and back the blue and get rid of these absolutely outrageous policies that have made our communities less safe.
Yeah, such important stuff. Congresswoman, one other question before we got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you about where Joe Biden's presidency goes from here. We've got a crisis in Russia. We have a crisis with China. Why do these actors suddenly feel emboldened to step into American policy and embarrass us in some cases and threaten our allies?
Well, the first year of any presidency is when our adversaries test the commander-in-chief of the United States, and Joe Biden has failed test after test after test, whether it was cyber attacks from Russia, whether it's China really asserting its leadership, unfortunately, on the global stage and trying to counter American leadership with our allies. And they've seen Joe Biden's weakness. They've seen the lack of accountability. They've seen the lack of strength when it comes to American foreign policy. And they're acting. This is why Putin is acting. And the fact that this administration has said these are going to be the consequences after any type of incursion, and Joe Biden said a minor incursion. Any incursion is an invasion when we're talking about a democratic partner, a democracy like Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine before. This is an incredibly important country. This is an important partner to the United States, and it's important geographically. We want countries like Ukraine to work with their Western allies rather than allowing Russia to essentially attack one of our important allies. So this is as a result of Joe Biden's failed leadership, and Putin sees this. This would have never happened under President Trump.
Would you recommend, if you had a chance to talk to the president, would you boycott the Olympics for what China has done around the world?
Well, certainly China should never have been hosted the Olympics. The Olympic Committee should not be beholden to China, which unfortunately it has been. There should be a boycott when it comes to the Olympics. And it puts our athletes in a very difficult position. I have athletes in my district who are competing, and it puts them in, their cybersecurity at risk. It puts them at risk going to Beijing. So I think there should have been a much, much tougher approach when it comes to this administration. One other point, John, on the foreign policy. If you look back, China and Russia were watching the absolute outrageous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the catastrophic withdrawal. So both China's actions and Russia's action, North Korea's actions as well, are in response to that weak foreign policy and that weak turning away that they're seeing from Joe Biden from American leadership on the global stage. And when it comes to Ukraine, we should be taking steps, not in terms of troops, but in terms of weapons and resources to the Ukrainians to make sure they have what they need.
Yeah. Afghanistan is going to be one we're going to be talking about for a long time. Congressman Elise Stefanik, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.